Health Matters with Karen Key.
Well, I can't believe it's almost a year already since the last Cape Argus Pick and Pay cycle tour, but it actually is. And I'm joined once again this year by Dr. Basil Bonner, and he's the Chief Medical Officer for the tour. Dr. Bonner, good evening. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Corin. Thank you.
It must feel like yesterday for you as well.
Gosh, yeah, the year does really fly by. It's hardly believable that we're there already.
Now, the first thing that happens before the big day on the 10th is the Life Cycle Expo. And for those possibly who it's their first time, or maybe they've forgotten because they haven't been for a while, what happens at the Expo?
I think the Expo over the years has really grown in stature enormously, because the Expo at one point was really just a registration contact with a little bit of an expo thrown in on the side. It's now kind of become a registration contact with a lot of vital expo communication around cycling, around the goods and services involved with cycling, and then also around the health matters that are involved with cycling.
Now that takes place from the 7th from the 7th to the 9th, so just before the race itself.
That's right. So that's the Thursday, Friday and Saturday before the race.
Now, this is where Mediclinic comes to the fore, because they have this very big screening initiative which is vital for the race and for the riders.
Yeah, you know, I think that where this has all emanated from is that over the years we had a significant morbidity associated with cardiovascular disease, because people who are relatively unfit and perhaps even a little unhealthy, riding a cycle tour as a challenge of some sort or another, life challenge or other, and then something goes horribly wrong. And it kind of got us thinking that if we knew what those risks were, we could perhaps prevent bad outcomes. Certainly that seems to be the case, but there's clearly no direct association. I think it's more just a question of making people more aware of the simple things that they can do to ensure that they have a healthy ride and by inference a healthy lifestyle.
Now, when these checks are done at the Expo, have you ever come across a case where you've recommended that somebody doesn't take part on the Sunday?
In the beginning, that certainly was the case, and we were a bit concerned that people might see that as a disincentive to present themselves for testing, because they might be worried that we would then, enforce them to withdraw from the race. But yes, we have had, over a number of years, we've had a number of cases that have been unfit to ride. One or two of them because they are actually carrying significant health risks, be they, major sort of thyroid or thyrotoxic conditions, people with illnesses, from flu-like illnesses and serious conditions that might cause problems, to others that were sort of diabetic and uncontrolled, and somewhat kind of blissfully unaware of the fact that their diabetes is really that bad. I guess in some sort of denial process. And obviously those are the kind of people that would not cope in a stressed environment like cycling in the heat or the wind, etc., with massive exertion.
So all this sort of thing is checked at the Expo if you go for this medical screening?
That's right, absolutely.
Now, the other nice thing is that all that information about your health state, if you like, is loaded onto something called the Race Tech chip, and all that information is in there. So heaven forbid something happens to you along the way, you fall off or you pass out or whatever could happen, all that information is very easily accessible.
Well, yes, the race chip technology has really developed enormously over the years, and in fact it's got to the point now where we are actually accurately able to track where people with their race tech chip are on the route. It helps us to know, for example, if there is a problem anywhere, we can pick it up based on the screening of their chip, how far they've gone around the route, etc. But also that data that's captured on the Race Tech chip is obviously available to us should we need to find or contact a particular cyclist. So there's a lot of valuable information that's contained on that chip.
Now, people need to be aware that, if they're healthy and there's no medical issues and they think it's just going to be an absolute breeze of a race, there are still things to consider. There's the heat, there's the wind, there's cramping, there's all sorts of things that could potentially, hopefully you don't, but could potentially go wrong. And people, I think, just need to be aware of that before they set out.
Sure, completely. I think that, forewarned is forearmed. I think that whichever way you look at it, unless you're one of the pro riders who's planning to do this in under 3 hours, most people obviously are out there for a good number of hours, and I think one has to just take cognizance of the fact that, the Cape weather throws everything at you. It really doesn't matter which year it is. Invariably, you're going to have some or other challenge. Very rarely do we get a perfect day. And also things in the peninsula can change from one minute to the next. So we go prepared for absolutely anything and everything. And so when things do crop up, we're not that surprised. And I think that's the attitude that the rider should take. They should prepare for that. They should prepare for, the weather inevitabilities. And then clearly prepare in terms psychologically, rest enough at this stage of the day. They should be resting a lot more than they should be training. And obviously the training needs to have come, in good time in preparation for the race. If you're undertrained for this race, it's not the end of the world. I think the important thing is that you understand that you're not at your very best, and therefore don't push yourself to the point where, you might disadvantage yourself.
At what point should somebody realistically stop if they are at a certain point, either medically or they've injured themselves and they think, oh, well, I'll just get to the end? At what point should they really consider stopping? What are the sort of warning signs, if you like?
Well, I think that, if you have any adverse symptomatology, so for example, if you have really painful joints or severely painful muscles, or you've got a headache, or you've got chest pain, or anything of that nature, pain's usually a very good indicator that you're probably overdoing it and that you ought to just scale down or stop completely. That's the first thing. I think the second thing is that if you're feeling unwell with it all, in other words, you either start slightly unwell and don't find that you don't have the energy or the legs to carry you, or you become unwell on the route, you get dizzy, you get nauseous, any of those kinds of symptoms, it's imperative that people then stop along the way. And there are, fortunately in this particular event, there are a number of water points that have Mediclinic medical facilities where you can stop and have a nurse and or a doctor have a look at you and decide, what the problem is and how serious it is or what significance there is attached to your symptoms. Sometimes it may just be something you've eaten or something that you've ingested, etc. Sometimes it's too much of the sweet stuff. And there are a whole host of different reasons that one can try and unpack. But I think the important thing is, if you're not feeling well, rather have it looked at than simply just push on and push on and push on regardless, and then come unstuck.
And there's no excuse that there won't be anybody to help you, because do tell people how many emergency service workers and doctors and nurses are going to actually be out there. The numbers are actually staggering.
Well, on the route itself, there are about 25 doctors and about 80 nursing staff around the route. And that's a significant number. That's probably more than we can muster in the peninsula in the emergency departments. But then we are looking after 40,000 cyclists.
Absolutely.
And then obviously there are more than 100 emergency vehicles, each with their 2 staff members. First aiders are out there, etc. So there's really a lot of help and support for riders, and I think that people should, not feel like they're out there on their own.
I think it's 250 physiotherapists who will be very busy rubbing those sore muscles, I'm sure. You always see those on television, is stopping and getting a good workout because they're cramping.
Yeah, I think the physios are invariably every year in for an absolute baptism of fire. There's nothing that prepares them for that when it arrives on the day. I don't think they ever in their careers will ever see that many patients in one collective again.
There's some very unusual emergency services that are going to be out there. I was looking through the list. There's the regular things like ER24 and the Metro ambulance services, the paramedic services, Medics in Motion, Volunteer Ambulance, Cape Medical Response, the HBC First Aiders. But then I get to this part and I'm a bit confused. The National Sea Rescue Institute stations, 3 of those, the Institute of Maritime Medicine, and obviously the Disaster Management Team. But why would the National Sea Rescue and Institute of Maritime Medicine be out there?
Well, I think that it's really just a question of mastering the kinds of resources that we might need on the day. The input from National Sea Rescue is very valuable because they have a number of valuable individuals, people who are trained in the management of A, emergencies and collective emergencies or major incidents, and B, many of them are skilled first aid first aiders or medical personnel with levels of training. So the resources are really what we're using. And in the event of there being a major incident, the NSRI have bases along the coastline where they could muster people and they could bring resources in if we needed to. So they're a valuable adjunct, and they're, again, volunteering and very willing and able. The military or the Navy obviously have resources in Simonstown, and they have access to logistical supply lines if we would need that, trucks, etc. So they're very useful people to have on board. And I think that the whole idea of the cycle tour is to be as inclusive as possible, to to get as many people involved as possible. This is a charity event, and people really enjoy being involved to be able to give back to the community and create the opportunities.
And as Chief Medical Officer, are you overseeing all of this?
Yes, I guess so.
Gosh, well, I hope you have a really good rest the night before. It sounds like you're going to have a very busy day on the 10th.
Yeah, I think that the whole concept of a life cycle week has extended a day into nearly 10 days now. So, the kind of activation, once it starts, it's like a roller coaster. It just rolls and rolls and rolls and rolls until it culminates on day 10 in the cycle tour. But, it's all good, and I think that we've got fairly used to rolling with the punches now, and I think we make sure that we have enough people on board and that the load is shared. And I think all in all, it's a stressful day, but it's certainly very enjoyable.
Well, if past cycle tours are anything to go by, they work extremely well. I mean, all this planning and preparation seems to just be spot on, and very few, if any, problems arise. So, Dr. Bonner, I wish you much joy and success with the next one on the 10th of March, and I hope everything goes very smoothly and that we have good weather for a change. But thank you very much indeed for joining us on the show this evening.
Great pleasure.
Thank you.
Lauren.
Good night to you.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Dr. Basil Bonner is the Chief Medical Officer for the Cape Argus Pick and Pay Cycle Tour, which will be taking place on Sunday the 10th of March. And the Life Cycle Expo takes place as well from the 7th to the 9th of March. And if you need more information on the tour or the expo, you can take a look at the website. It's www.cycletour.co.za.
Health Matters with Karen Key.